So I'm going to move on to the connectors here in this part, but I wanted to comment that actually the capacitor I thought was missing was here. It was caught in one of the connectors. And when I went to remove the connectors, I found it. So all of the expected capacitors were actually here, which is really nice. So let's jump into connectors. Is there really an order to do these? I'm almost tempted to do pin headers first because they're a little bit lower profile. So we've got the Altair, as in hair, Altair. Boy, I'm going to have a hard time converting to saying that correctly. Don't even know what I was going to say there when I got hung up on words. Get him trimmed to the proper size, and actually I want the flat off the tool towards the pins I want to keep, because it usually cuts a little better, a little more flush that direction. That's the proper number of pins. Gentle squeeze and pop. And we have him, and we'll tack a pin if I can hold him in place. Square it up, solder the rest of the pins. Actually looks nice and flush already, but and it was. This is a really nice addition to give you the VT100 terminal emulation. Just a really nice addition. The VT100 terminal emulation will allow things like full screen editors, additional games. There's just a lot of goodness to be had from it, so I'm very happy to see that on here. And of course the case upgrade. Everything I've seen, this is just going to be a gorgeous build when it's done. You know, the build was very nice before. We've got two groups of 3. Well, actually 2x6, or 2x3. You give me 6s. Green, red, blue selection. Can I get that to hang in place? So I can solder one pin. And we've got another 2x3 down here for baud rate select. Again, can I get it to hang in there long enough? Well, it was till I let the board rock. You know, whatever assembly order works for you. I'm fumbling a bit with these, but that's okay. Make sure they're both square and flush. Try not to put my finger on the pin I'm heating on this one. Burn myself. I'm happy with both of those. Working to keep the work actually in view of the camera here. The work tends to slide down towards the front edge of the bench as I'm working and off camera. And I'm trying to do a better job keeping it on camera. Come on. There you go. I can hear dogs downstairs doing doggy things. They just had their breakfast. So they're happy little girls again. That gets those, and then we move on to the single in line. We don't put a single in line here because the SD card holder solders directly into there. so I don't want to stuff it accidentally. One, two, three, four, five. Okay. It's really only 5 pins used for the ISP programming, but it's a 6-pin connector, like on my PIC Kit 3. Well, I think I need to get something over on this side of the board. I'm really not going to get anything over there. I just need to keep the board held down flush to keep it from falling out. Don't think it's quite square. A little bit harder to get these single rows square because you do what I just did there. The solder hadn't quite set up. Oh. Yep, it's going to be a pain. Well, I'm going to move on to the other couple. There's a 3-pin for setting the voltage. There's a 2-pin to bring an external 5 volts. And I will go ahead and go back. I'm trying to use some tape here to keep these kind of square and in place while I tack a pin on them. And neither one is particularly square. Shoot. Always got to be difficult. So in this case, I'm going to use one of the actual jumpers here so I can get a little bit better purchase with my finger on it and see if we can get it square. Look good to me. We've got another 2-pin for composite out sitting up here, which is actually something I kind of want to play with. I've got a old composite monitor from back in the day. It's very similar to the composite monitor I had on my LNW back in the 80s. I wish I'd have never given that machine away. Nope, still not square. Still not square. That's better. That would be kind of interesting to play with. It'll do 24, 25 line by 80 column pretty well. So we've got a strip of 4 to put in. Down here for the So I'm assuming he stuffs that, and he does. Got breakfast on the stove downstairs, and it smells really good. Suddenly hungry. Doesn't look quite square. I'd prefer it square. I felt it move a tiny bit. One here in the middle, it's a 3-pin, internal, external 3.3 volt jumper. You know, maybe, I'm just going to say maybe it would have been easier to start with these first, because you could actually use pressure down onto the PCB. He is certainly not square. See, didn't let the solder set up. Back to the 6-pin guy over here for the ISP, but I need to clean this hole out first. And for that, I have my trusty Heiko. And done. He is certainly not square. Let's see if we can square him up. Actually let the solder harden back up, and he looks good enough. Unhappy with that second solder joint. We'll reflow it. And I'm again working my way off camera. Apologies. I think that's all the pin headers. Oh no, there's a bootload pin header down there. I gotta find a better way to do these. I've always kind of done just what you see me doing here, kind of struggle, tack, manually straighten, sometimes manually straighten several times till I feel like it's flush. It is flush. So, oh, USB power, another 2-pinner. Well, just the joy that keeps giving. Nope. Again, not square. Could be getting close. So let's see, there's there and there, there, 2 pin there, 3 pin up there, 2x3, 2x3. And I went ahead and put the ISP header in. He doesn't show it, just because I actually want to play with it. So really, add the jacks and connectors. There's no notes. About height for the SD connector. So there's the 15 pin. That is the VGA connector. He snapped in nice and tight, so I think he's already nice and flush and square, and he is, so we can just go ahead and solder him up. I find it easier to solder the center pins first and then get the 2 outside rows, and that way it's a little harder to end up with a solder bridge on these high density connectors. Because if I'm soldering on the outside and then come to solder the inside pins and heat up one of the outside pins, I will get a bridge. Not great looking solder joint. That's better. So there's the 2 sets of pins here that snap through the board to hold the connector in, and those really provide the mechanical strain relief. If I leave those floating, every time I plug a cable in and out, I'm going to stress the solder joints and eventually break them. So you really do need to solder these. My JBC here will take care of these really quick. You may need more dwell time depending on your soldering pencil and its thermal performance. The JBC is really good at throwing a lot of thermal energy down very quick. So take your time to get it done. We've got the DB9 next, and it's going to be the same exercise. Snaps in. 9 pins in the serial connector to be soldered, and the ears on the outside. Neighbor's going off to do her Saturday, whatever it is she does every Saturday, and her dogs bark when she leaves, and then my dogs bark. It's very predictable. We've got the PS2 connector. It's actually got a little snap in on it. Hopefully hold it flush. All 6 of the pins seem to be in the holes, so I feel safe to snap it in. And then again, the same thing, the 3 larger holes where the metal pins came through should be soldered, because they become the strain relief. Excuse me, when you're plugging connectors in and out, and keep that strain from being passed through to where the pins are soldered in. We've got doesn't seem correct, and it's not, is this guy. So it's the audio jack. I think there was enough of a pressure fit there that I don't need to tape it in place. I'll just hit a pin to hold it in place, and then just reflow and push it in flush. I didn't feel it move. Not happy with that solder joint. That's better. And there's a single pin here in the middle. That's probably the barrel ground, and a bit of strain relief again. We've got the little SD card adapter, which seems to just sit down in there. I'm going to solder a pin, and then I'll square it up and finish soldering it. It does go on the top side of the board. It looks nice and square. Got the DC input, or power input. We'll need a bit of tape, just kind of hold it there. You know, get one pin tacked in. Push to make sure it's flush, which it is. More solder to that first joint. That one looks really gray, not shiny, as does this one. With leaded solder, which I use, you should get a nice shiny joint. With lead free, you don't really get a shiny joint. So there is a USB connector here. I'm going to add or solder one pin again. Check for flush. That's not flush, which is interesting. It's got power ground and the data pins. And then it's got these two outer ones in the larger holes that are again mechanical strain relief to keep you from cracking the actual 4 solder joints that really matter. Not as happy with that as I could be. Really, I think that gets us through all the connectors. My board looks like his board. I don't see any holes on the top side of the board where I missed a component. Take a look at the quality of my soldering. There's a little solder ball there we want to get rid of. Soldering job all looks adequate. And I am eyeballing every joint. I have been known to miss a solder joint here and there. I'm going to add a little bit of solder to the strain relief over here because it doesn't have solder all the way around. Just make that a bit more solid. Let's move on to the ICs. So I think at this point I'm safe to trim these 6 pins that come off the micro SD card down, so they're just not hanging so low. Really, there we are. I'm happy with that. Should be 2 ICs. We'll go ahead and pop those in since he says to in the instructions. There's the Max 232. You can see the notch in the silk screen. It aligns to the notch in the socket because they got the socket in the right orientation. Square these leads a bit to the package. Get him down in there. Could be a little better centered than that. I've got an unhappy lead. Don't want to bend pin. And the Max 232. Kind of a pain on a package this big to square up the leads. 250F 128B, same exact part I've been trying to program with no luck. Need to square the leads a little bit more. What always happens is my finger gets in the way and one of these end pins gets squished in a little bit. Oh, he's really being a bit of a pain. Yep. A little bit more. Shoot, now I've gone too far for a few of the pins. Notch to notch to notch in silkscreen. You are really being a bugger. There we go. Pin ones are correct on everything. There it is. I think the last thing he talked about here is jumpers. So we'll go ahead and do that. And I would like to have green text. Yep, and of course you can mix the colors to get what you want. The 3-volt. So he says the 3-volt selector set to external, which is this guy right here. Need 2 jumpers for baud rate to get 9600. So we want a jumper B and C. Bootload, no jumper. Max 232 power set to 3.3 volt. USB set to no jumper. So green, external, B and C, bootload, no jumper, Max 232 on the 3.3 volt side, and USB power, no jumper. Perfect. Well, I think we've got everything together here we need to for this card. I've just noticed the power jack isn't as square as I would have liked. Not rotated much, but it is rotated. Shoot. Now, it's not enough to really matter. except I can even see it looking here. I'm going to do my best to unsolder that and straighten it out, just because I'm unhappy with how crooked it is. This guy here a minute to warm up. Let's see if I can actually draw the solder off. Rotate a bit. Still got a lot of solder on the top of the board. I'm not going to be able to actually remove it. But that is certainly more square. Maybe a tiny bit more. And then I will resolder it, and the resoldering that will relieve the mechanical strain I've created in the solder joints and the pins, because it'll allow them to move back into their natural positions. Let's see if it's still square. There it is. So definitely something for you to watch out for in your assembly. Still looks square to the silk screen. We got one more joint down here that we want to relieve mechanical tension in. Actually, I want to reflow that again. And this one, they need a little bit more solder on them now. It's better. Okay, with that, I'm a little more satisfied. This will go on this way. I'm going to have to remove the nuts off the two DB9, well, the DB9 and the 15 connector for this to sit flush, but I can already see that'll look square coming through the hole there. The SD card lines up with the slot. So yeah, it looks good. So I think with that, I will actually wrap up this third video, and I'll see you in the next one.